Hello, and welcome to this series of short videos. My name is Michael Oak, and I help ordinary people write their life stories. That having been said, in the 26 years I've been doing this, I've yet to meet an ordinary person. Everybody is special, particularly for their family and friends. And that's what we're helping them do. We're recording that life to be enjoyed and celebrated for generations to come. And of course, for the sheer fun of it. Where better to start than with the first chap I worked with, a lovely man called Roy Barton. And this is his book. But this isn't the book to me. This is Roy. This is a dear friend. And there's many more friends I've worked with over the years. I'd seen an article of someone helping his grandfather write his life story, and I thought, what a lovely idea. And so I placed an ad, and fortunately enough for me, Roy saw that ad and got in touch. He had been inspired to write about his life. His son basically said, "Dad, why don't you write some of these stories down?" I'm not sure if it's because he'd heard them a few times before, or I think it was more to give his dad a hobby. But Roy never did things in halves. And so when we met up, he had 4 lever arch files of this manuscript. There were probably only 4 or 5 words per line, but even so, it amounted to quite a tome, as you can see. So we had a chat and we agreed to give it a go. And so the first thing was obviously to type up the manuscript, which is what I did, every single word. And then I thought it might be a useful idea to read the manuscript to Roy so that he could hear it the way other people read it. And he was quite impressed by that, not with my reading, but with what he had written. It was much better than he thought. But also other things came out. We would spot ambiguities, or perhaps he would mention his mother but not say what her name was or her maiden name. Or he might be talking about Jack. And I'll say, "Well, who's Jack?" And he'll say, "Oh yeah, he's my brother-in-law." Just simple things like that. And as you know, if you're lucky enough to have any perhaps old school friends that you speak to from time to time, once you get chatting, just a whole myriad of lovely, amazing stories start flowing forth. And this is what was happening between Roy and myself. And we actually had great fun. We got on tremendously. We completed the book. I put photos in it. He had 23 volumes. He was delighted. It was then that I told him that it was my first project and we had a good laugh. And yeah, that was super. We went out for a meal to celebrate. Then Roy had a couple of strokes and his wife, Margaret, got in touch and said, "Mike, get Roy to do another book. He needs a hobby. He's losing the will to live." So we did decide to work together on this, but this was a different sort of project. It had to be because Roy wasn't up to so much writing. So this was, I won't say ghostwriting, but it was certainly more collaborative. So I would get there about 10 o'clock. We would chat for an hour. I took my huge, great computer with me. Roy would go to bed for 3 or 4 hours and then perhaps come down at maybe 2 or 3 o'clock. And I would read through what I'd written. And so we produced the second book that way. The first book was from 1916 to 1960. And the second book obviously started in 1960 to continue. And we loved it, and we know it kept Roy going because he was waiting for the birth of his granddaughter and she was born. And 9 months later, we were still working on the book. So we know it fulfilled its function. And Roy was loving it, but sadly he was wilting. And so we had to draw the book to an end. And sadly, a couple of months afterwards, Roy did die, which was very sad. And but Margaret gave me the huge honour of asking me to speak at Roy's funeral. So I was wondering what to say. And I thought I would read some of Roy's words from the book. So I found 3 or 4 pages of how he met and married Margaret. Now, Roy's a bit like me. He wouldn't use one word where 27 does just as well. And of course, this comes through in his writing. It's quite woolly, but that was dear, dear Roy. And so I read this as part of the funeral address. And his son, who was a GP, came up to me afterwards and said, "Dad will never die." That was Dad speaking through those words. And I thought, wow. It was then that I realised I'd stumbled across something special. Because Roy lives on. Roy lives on through this book and the second volume. And of course, so do his parents and grandparents that he was writing about. And I just want to say thank you, Roy. Thank you for taking a chance on me. You do live on. You're a very, very special man. And since then, I've worked on dozens and dozens of other books. In the next video, we'll be looking at different styles of book, different structures, and how potentially other family members can be involved.